We are back live here at the Weather Farm as we are watching two significant storms for the upcoming week, and we are keeping an eye on those Thanksgiving Day travel plans, so we have the information that you need to know to stay safe as you prepare for your holiday travels. Let's dive right into our forecast. As we look here at our jet stream, it has been flowing across the northern tier, keeping the cold air really up across Canada. But we are watching an area of low pressure out across California and the Four Corners region. As this continues to move out into the southern plains, as we get to our Sunday, that's going to provide the mechanism for some severe weather Sunday into Monday. But back behind it, we're watching yet another trough. This low is going to get absorbed with the jet stream, but we watch again out here across the northern plains Tuesday into Wednesday. How far south will that cold air move? We're going to watch that because through Wednesday, there's a lot of agreement with the models. But as we get toward that ever important Thanksgiving Day forecast and into Black Friday shopping, the models are really all over the place. So it's still too early to tell what's going to happen in your neck of the woods. But we have confidence that as we go into the upcoming weekend, into early next week, there will be some heavy rainfall and severe weather from the southern plains through the Tennessee and Ohio Valley. So our threat for severe weather on our Friday isn't all that great. It is just a marginal risk through central Texas up through Arkansas. We could have isolated rumbles or two of thunder, some light hail. Heavy rainfall is going to be the major weather event that we're going to be watching on our day Friday. In terms of our temperatures, it has been warm across the central plains and the eastern half of the United States. The real cold weather has been stuck in the Pacific Northwest and the Rockies. But as we go into early next week, we start to see that first jab of colder air making its way to the northern plains and into the Four Corners region, down into central Texas even, pushing that warm air out across the east. So your Thanksgiving forecast here across the Northeast is going to be a warm one. You're not going to see that snowfall. But how far and how potent is this next batch of cold air? That's still to be determined. This particular model does want to bring cooler air into the eastern half of the United States, starting for our Black Friday into our weekend after Thanksgiving. But there has been some changes in the models over the last 24 hours, and it's something we're going to continue to monitor this coming weekend. We're also watching the threat of heavy snow anywhere from the northern plains through the Great Lakes into the Northeast for that time period of Thanksgiving into that subsequent weekend. We're also watching a slight risk of heavy snow across the Rocky Mountains, even here across the favored northeast snowband regions, Buffalo, Rochester. You're going to be in play for the potential of moderate risk of heavy snow as we make our way through the last few days of November. So let's set the stage here for our Friday. As we wake up, we're watching an area of low pressure that is centered across parts of Kansas. It is spreading rainfall through Missouri into southern Indiana and Illinois. That will continue to move to the east on our day Friday. Out across the northeast, we're watching snow fly across parts of eastern Quebec. High pressures off the east coast, but down here across parts of California, there's that low pressure system. And it's that deepening low that's going to bring rainfall to southern California, snowfall in those higher elevations. That low is going to continue to deepen as it moves into the Four Corners region and eventually the panhandle of Texas by Sunday. And it's going to set the stage for severe weather here in the central part of the United States. So let's put everything into motion here. We watch those rain showers move to the east. They kind of fall apart by the time we get to Friday night into Saturday morning, but we watch that low pressure continue to dive further south and deepen, and then it's going to move into the Four Corners region on our Sunday, spreading rain for New Mexico, snow in those higher elevations. Across the Pacific Northwest, we are watching snow in those highest elevations of British Columbia, rain as we make our way into those far northwestern parts of Washington State. And we still have a cool northwesterly flow across the northeast that's going to keep our temperatures a little bit below normal for our Friday and our Saturday. But as we go into our Sunday, we're going to wake up and we're going to watch that system really start to get going here across West Texas and New Mexico, bringing rain and heavy snow. Across the Pacific Northwest, we have another system moving on shore, bringing rain to Washington State and Oregon. And out west, we are still continued with high pressure. But look, we have high pressure centered across Arkansas, and we are seeing a ridge that is building here across the central plain. We're going to get strong southerly winds, and that's going to warm temperatures here into the 60s and 70s across most of the southeast, even up to the Ohio Valley as we make our way into our Sunday. Rain showers are going to stay off the east coast for the end of our weekend. So as we go into early next week, we're going to watch as we get to Sunday into Monday. We're going to watch the potential for some severe weather here across Texas into Arkansas. There could be some watches and severe weather threats issued Monday into Tuesday. All of that moves towards the east by the time we get to Tuesday morning into the northeast as it interacts with that cooler air with that northwesterly flow. We're going to see some of that turn over to rain to snow, but it's quickly going to warm up as we see that ridge being pushed off to the east, bringing southerly winds into New England for your Thanksgiving. Out across the northern tier, rain through the Dakotas into Minnesota. But as that cold air begins to dive into the northern plain, we could see enough of it mixed with the lingering precipitation that could provide a good blanket of snow across the northern plains into the Dakotas and Minnesota as we get to the middle of next week. So in terms of our temperatures, as I mentioned, it's warm across the southeast, 70s and 80s for our Fridays, 50s and 60s across the middle tier. We even have some 60s with some downsloping winds off of the Rockies. So it's going to warm up places like Rapid City, South Dakota. You could be near 60 for your Friday. Cool in the northeast. Out across the deserts, it's relatively cool for this time of the year, 60s and 70s. And across the northwest, where temperatures are being held down in the 40s. Almost a repeat pattern of that as we make our way into our Saturday. A little bit warmer across places like Lincoln, Nebraska, into parts of Kansas where you're going to be warming into the middle 60s. And that warmth starts to spread east as we make our way into Sunday. And even up through the East Coast, widespread 60s are going to be common as far north as parts of central Pennsylvania. And as we go into our Monday, it is much of the same. But we start to see that cold air building across parts of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. That is going to be that next jab that's going to make its way into the northern plains as we get to the middle of next week. And how far deep that cold air makes it is going to determine what kind of weather we see across the eastern two-thirds of the United States. So as I mentioned, as we get towards that Wednesday, Thursday of Thanksgiving, there's a lot of uncertainty. We expect the eastern half of the United States to be wet in some form, rain across the southeast, especially up the east coast with those southerly winds out ahead of that low pressure system. But how quickly does that cold air mix in behind the low pressure system? How quickly does it turn that rain into snow? Where will the heaviest snow axis set up? So if you're seeing weather forecast maps showing heavy snow for your area at this point for Thanksgiving or beyond, those maps just simply are not reliable this far out. This pattern has been changing each and every day that we've been monitoring over the last 2 to 4 days, and we expect this to continue to change as we go through the weekend into the early parts of next week. So stay with us here at the Weather Farm, and we're going to bring you the latest info where we think the most difficult travel is going to be for your Thanksgiving holiday. In terms of our precipitation this weekend, the heaviest rains are going to be across Missouri through Illinois and Indiana. Basically south of I-70 is where we will see up to an inch of rainfall. Even across the south, across parts of Mississippi and Alabama, rainfall generally less than 1/2 of an inch. We look back out across the southwest, generally less than 1/2 of an inch as well for liquid precipitation. Heavier amounts across parts of British Columbia where you could see snowfall in the feet among those higher elevations. And as we get into Monday of next week, the western half of the United States is where we're going to focus that precipitation mainly. Again, it's going to be light in nature, generally less than 1/2 of an inch, except where you get in those higher mountainous regions. That's where we're going to see the heavier snowfall. And that snowfall could accumulate 12 to 24 inches. We're going to start to see that low pressure make its way out of the Four Corners region into Texas. That's going to spread rain through Arkansas and Tennessee. That could accumulate up to 1/2 of an inch. But by the time we get to Tuesday and Wednesday, especially your travel day, heavy rain in eastern Tennessee, Knoxville, down to Atlanta, Tuscaloosa, down up towards Philadelphia. You can see rainfall amounts 1 to 2 inches. Across the northern tier, we're going to watch this in the form of snowfall. Snowfall could accumulate 3 to 6 inches across parts of North Dakota and southern Manitoba by the time we get to our Thanksgiving day. And out across the Pacific Northwest, that axis of heavier precipitation starts to shift a little bit further south, bringing its rains to Washington and Oregon. Now, in terms of our snowfall, it is going to stay mainly north of the Canadian border as we make our way towards Thanksgiving. And I'm stopping this map at Thanksgiving because that's when the uncertainty really starts to build in. There is some hints that we could see heavy snow across the Great Lakes in those favored lake effect snow regions. But right now, there's just too much uncertainty with the modeling data to go ahead and say that's going to be a certain. And so we're going to keep most of the snow north of the Canadian border at this time, as well as out across the Rockies. We do have some higher confidence across parts of eastern Montana and northern North Dakota that we could see that 3 to 6 inch snowfall as we make our way Tuesday into Wednesday, but that's still up for debate. Could the pattern shift? Could the axis shift, move it more a little bit further east or a little bit further south? Definitely. We'll keep you informed as we prepare you early next week. So let's take a look here at those upper level patterns. And this is a map I like to show from time to time. So this is today through Thanksgiving. We're going to see warm temperatures here in the eastern half of the United States with that low pressure off the coast of California. That's going to bring cooler than normal temperatures across the southwest. We're starting to see a ridge build here in the Gulf of Alaska. But as we go into next week, that ridge is really going to stretch up further north into Alaska. We're going to start to see colder air make its way into the eastern half of the United States. We start to see this high pressure being built here off of Greenland. We have high pressure to the west of Alaska, building high pressure in the Gulf of Alaska to the south and east. So that's going to push that colder air down into the northern plains, potentially into the Ohio Valley. But then as we go into the first full week of December, we see that ridge kind of weaken a little bit. So that cold air starts to retreat. We start to see a ridge starting to build off the southeast coast of the United States. That's going to kind of push that colder air a little bit back towards the north and west as well. But as we get into the middle parts of December, this is from the 11th to the 7th, we start to see a strong ridge building a little bit further west of Alaska than we saw to begin December. And so that's going to push that colder air potentially a little bit further into the western part of the United States, because there are signs that that ridge that we saw here is going to build a little bit stronger just off the coast of the Carolinas. And we get that little high pressure here building here. It's going to squeeze that colder air to the western half of the United States as we get towards the middle of December. So this is something we're definitely going to be watching over the next several days. But these long-term patterns give us an indication of what December is going to look like. In terms of our temperature outlook, as we begin our month of December, going from Thanksgiving into the first few days of December, much of the country is expected to be below normal in its temperature, as well as being above normal in its precipitation for that time period. And that's an interesting thing, because if we look across the northern hemisphere here, we see a good snowpack being built across the northern climates. Even across parts of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, we're starting to see that snowpack build to the tune of 3 to 8 inches in most locations. And if that snow does stay heavy across the Canadian border as we make our way Thanksgiving into early December, that's going to continue to fill in this snowpack map. And as that colder air gets dislodged from those northern climates and those lobes of the polar vortex make their way into the lower 48, that's going to allow it to keep its city and its cold core and bring bouts of colder weather to the eastern half of the United States to begin our December. And our La Nina map, our CDAS Nino 3.4 index, continues to keep us in a La Nina pattern as we've been for the last several weeks. Right now, our current value is negative 1.1, indicating a weak La Nina at this point. And the Climate Prediction Center agrees with all of this. The snowpack building, the jabs of colder air, as we saw in that 500 millibar anomaly map. And so for the month of December, the northern half of the United States is expected to have below normal temperatures. That even stretches down to places like St. Louis, Springfield, Columbus, Ohio, into the northeast. Warmer than normal temperatures across the Four Corners region through southern Texas and across parts of Florida. And in terms of our precipitation, we're going to see above normal precipitation through the Ohio Valley, the Great Lakes, the Northeast, even the Intermountain West. You're going to have above normal precipitation. So at where that colder air sets up, do we get that snowpack across parts of Canada to keep that cold air cold as it makes its way down into the lower 48? That's going to provide an interesting setup as we look for the possibility of significant weather events for the month of December. Well, we thank you for joining us here at the Weather Farm for your Friday forecast. We hope you've enjoyed that as you prepare to make your Thanksgiving Day travel plans. Check back with us on Monday for the latest information. Go ahead and let us know what's going on in your neighborhood. Are you hoping for sunshine and warm temperatures? Have a great weekend, and we will see you soon.